Yo, what's going on, guys? Today we're going to take a look at the Week 8 NFL slate on Draftkings. Take a first look. I am recording this video on Monday afternoon. These are my first looks at the slate. We're going to go through each position. I'll just hit on some guys that stand out to me early on in the week. We will build out a lineup as we go, sort of build out a cash game lineup, talk through each play, talk through guys that maybe stand out given their price tag, matchup, volume. There are some injuries we're going to need to watch as the week goes on. Like I said, I'm recording this on Monday. There's a lot of questionable guys right now, like Drew Brees, Matt Ryan. There's some running backs that could potentially come back from injury. There's also some running backs that got injured on Sunday that could potentially miss this week. So I'll try and break all that down as we go through each position and as we build out the lineup. But I do want to let you guys know before we get started that I do have 3 videos already up on the channel today. I made my Week 7 recap video where I recapped my picks, recapped my lineups, just to kind of talk through the Week 7 slate, how it went for me. If you want to check that video out, it's already up on the channel. Also, my video for the Monday Night Football Showdown slate is already up on the channel as well if you want to watch that. And then later today, after I upload this first look video, I will be making my NBA video for the opening night slate on Tuesday. NBA does start back tomorrow on Tuesday, so I will have an NBA video up later tonight if you guys are going to be playing NBA tomorrow. But let's go ahead and take a look at this Week 8 slate. Start off at quarterback. So one thing I'm noticing with the quarterback pricing this week is DraftKings did a pretty good job of pricing up a lot of the quarterbacks. Russell Wilson's up to 7,200. Deshaun Watson's up to 7,100. Even Jared Goff, after he had a good game last week against the Falcons, and another good matchup at home against the Bengals, is up to 6,800. So we've been able to pay up at quarterback or in cash games most of the year, like going to these mid 6K guys. I don't know if we're going to be able to do that this week because of how the pricing is and because I don't see a ton of great cheap plays that I'm in love with early on in the week. Guys like Drew Brees could potentially be cash game viable, maybe Kyler Murray, even Matthew Stafford in that 6K range. But I want to touch on some values that I'm looking to. Obviously, the guys at the top are viable this week. I just don't know if you can play them in cash games, which is kind of what we're going to focus on in this first look video. Like Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, I just don't know if you can get to them in cash games without, you're going to have to sacrifice at either running back or receiver, and I just don't know if you want to do that because the high volume workhorse running backs you get and the high volume receivers, I don't know if it's worth paying up at quarterback to get away from those. Like, you want to get those running backs and receivers in cash games most of the time. So we're probably going to have to go a little bit cheaper. You've got like Josh Allen at home against the Eagles, who could be a play. Drew Brees could definitely be an option if he's healthy this week, 6,300 at home. We know how well Drew Brees plays at home. It's a great matchup against the Cardinals. He's someone I'll for sure be keeping my eye on as the week goes on. Even on the other side of that game, like Kyler Murray against the Saints could be viable. Matthew Stafford at home against the Giants, also in a really good matchup. You got Matt Ryan, who, even though he sucked last week, he could be a play at home against the Seahawks, back down to 6K. Teddy Bridgewater, if Brees doesn't play, you got Bridgewater at home for only 5,900 against the Cardinals. But the guy that I was looking at, it's going to be a pretty gross to say, but I mean, Ryan Tannehill is only 5,100 at home against the Bucs. Ryan Tannehill did not look bad at all, taking place of Mariota last week against the Chargers. He completed 23 of 29 passes, 79% completion percentage, threw for over 300 yards and multiple touchdowns, had 23 DraftKings points against the Chargers at home in his last start where he did take place of Mariota. He didn't start in Week 6 against Denver, but Mariota did get benched in that game, and Tannehill took over. Pretty positive Tannehill's going to be the starter for this Week 8 matchup at home against the Buccaneers, and he's only 5,100 on DraftKings. On a slate right now where I'm not seeing a ton of great value, I think going cheap with Ryan Tannehill in cash games is viable this week for sure at 5,100. It's going to allow you to pay up for the expensive running backs, expensive receivers that you want to get in there. So I'm for sure looking at Tannehill this week. Maybe as the week goes on, we'll get some more injury news, clear up a few injuries, and maybe that opens up some value so we don't have to go to Tannehill. Obviously, in my final look video that I'll upload on Friday night, you'll kind of know my full thoughts whether or not I'll be looking this cheap at quarterback. But for right now, I think Tannehill is for sure viable at only 5,100, especially given the matchup. This Buccaneers defense has been atrocious against the pass this year, very tough against the run. They've been a pretty big pass funnel. They're definitely a team you can throw on, but a team that's tough to run on. I expect Tannehill to have a good game, and he's only 5,100. If he gets you 15 to 20 DraftKings points, that's pretty good value at his price tag, especially for cash games. So let's move on to running back. We know we're going to be able to pay up for some of these expensive running backs since we went cheap with Tannehill at QB. At the top of the running back chart, we do have Christian McCaffrey back on the slate. Did see a big price up, though, along with the quarterbacks. McCaffrey saw a big price up to 9,200. And it's also a pretty tough matchup on the road against the 49ers. The 49ers arguably have one of the best defenses in the league, at least so far this season they have. McCaffrey, though, his volume just always puts him in play, especially for cash games. Even last week against Tampa Bay, or week 6 against Tampa Bay, when he wasn't efficient at all, only rushed the ball, or only averaged 1.5 yards per carry, 22 carries for only 31 yards, 4 catches for 26 yards. He still got into the end zone twice with 21 DraftKings points, even though he wasn't efficient at all. McCaffrey just sees so much volume that even if he only averages like 2-3 yards a carry, the volume can get him there. He has so much touchdown potential with how they use him in the passing game. He's going to be the goal line back. Even though it's a tough matchup, I think Christian McCaffrey is still one of the top cash plays this week. The floor that he gives you is just so safe for cash, and obviously he has a ceiling as well. Even if they're winning, if they're trailing, McCaffrey's going to be involved regardless. So I think he's a top play. I'd still prefer him over Saquon Barkley. Only a $300 difference. Barkley in a much better matchup, but I still prefer McCaffrey just given his volume and the work that he sees. But then we have a guy like Leonard Fournette at home against the Jets, who I think, again, this week is going to be a very solid option. DraftKings did price him up to 7,800, but honestly, that might still be too cheap for the volume that Fournette's getting, especially for a matchup at home against the Jets team that has struggled against the run this year. Last week against Cincinnati, Fournette was one of the clear plays on the board. He didn't even have that great of a game. Didn't get into the end zone, but still had 29 carries, 131 yards, 2 catches for 14 yards. We know he's going to get the pass down volume. He's been their workhorse back all season. He's touching the ball almost 30 times a game. Now he's getting the matchup at home against the Jets. If I can go McCaffrey and Fournette to start off with, we will try and do that. Maybe we'll have to drop down later on in the video, but I'm going to try and get in both of those expensive running backs, secure those touches, secure that floor that both guys give you. We're for sure going to have to find like a cheap RB3 if we want to play a running back in our flex. There were a couple guys I was looking at. There's definitely an injury we're going to have to watch this week with Kerryon Johnson. Kerryon Johnson got hurt Sunday against the Vikings. If he plays this week, I think he's a great option at home against the Giants for only 5,700. But if Kerryon is out, you do have Ty Johnson down here for 4,900, who I assume will be the starter. He's for sure going to be someone to keep an eye on this week. Probably could go ahead and plug him in the flex because I expect him to see a pretty nice workload if Kerryon does sit this game. He did get 10 carries for 29 yards, 4 catches for 28 yards. It was a tough matchup against the Vikings. Much better matchup here against the Giants. Ty Johnson for sure viable this week if Kerryon sits. We could plug him in as a salary saver at the flex, and if we want to get off of him later on in the video, we can do so. But we've got 3 running backs that all should see pretty nice workloads, especially McCaffrey and Fournette. I think Johnson will see a pretty good workload as well if Kerryon is out. But now let's go ahead and take a look at receiver. I can already tell you we're going to need some value at receiver. We're not going to be able to pay up for the studs at the top. There are some studs in good spots, like I think DeAndre Hopkins, especially if Will Fuller sits this game. DeAndre Hopkins is in a great spot. But he's up to 8,100 on DraftKings, and I just don't know if we can play that in cash games. Same with like Michael Thomas up to 8K. Even if Drew Brees returns, I expect Thomas to play much better if Brees is back, but still 8K in cash, I just rather would play the running backs over the expensive receivers. So we're for sure going to have to find some value. Just looking in the 6K, maybe 5K range, a couple guys that could catch my eye. Like Kenny Golladay, I think is in a really good spot at home against the Giants for only 6,400. Going to need to keep an eye on that Will Fuller news. If he's out, maybe that could open up like Kenny Stills or Kuti. I think both of those guys are pretty cheap this week on DraftKings. Allen Robinson just continues to crush every week. Now he gets a matchup against the Chargers. Pretty banged up Chargers defense right now. 16 targets last week for Allen Robinson. He's a pretty safe option week in and week out, giving you pretty much a double-digit floor this season. Gets a ton of targets. They look to him in the red zone as well. He's for sure in play this week. I just don't know if we're going to be able to get to him with like what we've got now. We'd probably have to drop down from one of the running backs. And I just don't know if I want to do that because I'd like to secure that running back floor that those guys give you. Marvin Jones coming off a 4-touchdown game, got priced up to 5,800 on DraftKings. I'm not going to be playing that in cash games. Probably won't even go to that in tournaments either. Just don't think it's really necessary. Larry Fitzgerald's one guy that really catches my eye, down to 5,400 on DraftKings. He does play a lot out of the slot, so he should be able to avoid Lattimore in this game. Probably will match up with P.J. Williams, who's been a pretty bad corner this season. Fitzgerald got priced down to 5,400 after he had a bad game last week against the Giants. He was 6,100, saw a $700 decrease in price. Fitzgerald continues to see consistent targets just about every week, besides last week against the Giants. Now with his price tag going down in a game where the Cardinals are probably going to have to throw a lot, a game that could have a lot of shootout potential, Larry Fitzgerald for sure is a guy I'll be keeping my eye on at 5,400. Just don't know if we're going to be able to get to him either in this lineup. We're going to have to look like 5K and below. One guy that stood out to me at 5K was DK Metcalf against the Falcons. I think this is a really good matchup for Metcalf. This is a really good spot in general for the Seahawks. The Falcons have had one of the worst secondaries this year. They've had one of the worst defenses. We saw the Rams just run all over the Falcons, scored like 30 points, I believe. Now you got DK Metcalf coming in at only 5K. Sees consistent targets pretty much every week. Is going to get you 4, 5, 6 targets. That's pretty much his target floor. And obviously he's got upside for more than that. He has a lot of big play potential. Had a decent game last week, 4 catches for 37 yards, 8.3 DraftKings points. I think he did lose a fumble, or 4 catches for 53 yards, excuse me. I think he did fumble the ball, so he would have had like 10 DK points. Don't know if Metcalf gives you the most solid floor, but it is such a good matchup that even though he doesn't have that high of a floor, I think he's still viable at 5K early on in the week, trying to find some cheap receivers. Then you got like the Houston receivers. You got Stills and Kuti, who are both cheap. Could be options if Will Fuller is out. Christian Kirk, definitely a guy we're going to want to keep our eye on. If he plays this week for only 4,700, he's going to be someone I keep my eye on, and I'll be targeting in cash games for sure at that price tag if he's fully healthy. Even some of these Tennessee receivers, if you want to stack with Ryan Tannehill, these Tennessee receivers are both very cheap. Corey Davis is only 4,400. A.J. Brown is 4,100. Davis had a very solid game last week along with Tannehill. 6 catches for 80 yards and a touchdown against the Chargers. Got targeted 7 times. A.J. Brown also saw a pretty good amount of volume as well. 8 targets, 6 catches for 64 yards, 12 DraftKings points from Brown. I think both of these Tennessee receivers are in play this week, especially given the matchup against a very bad Buccaneers secondary. Really, it's close between the two. I mean, they're both probably going to see anywhere from 6 to 8 targets. So far this season, A.J. Brown's kind of been the more productive receiver, but a lot of that has come with Marcus Mariota at quarterback. He's definitely shown the most upside. Corey Davis has had some decent games as well, I believe. Like, he had a 20-point game against Atlanta. Both him and Brown did do pretty well against Atlanta, and both of them did pretty well last week against the Chargers. I think you could definitely look to one of those guys to pair with Ryan Tannehill. For now, I'll go with A.J. Brown just because he's cheaper, and that's going to allow us to fit in a little bit more, or a little bit more salary. That's going to give us a little more salary to fit in what we want. But if I have some remaining salary after we finish, you could definitely upgrade from Brown to Davis. But I think it's totally viable to pair Tannehill with one of those receivers in cash this week because both are so cheap and the matchup is so good. Even a guy like Cole Beasley against the Eagles could for sure be viable. 6 targets last week, 3 catches, 16 yards, and a touchdown. Great matchup against a bad Eagles secondary. But I don't know if I'm going to be going to Beasley in cash because I think John Brown is just a way better option and gives you way more upside. Brown's 5,900, did see a bit of a price increase, but this is just such a good spot against the Eagles. This Eagles team has been one of the worst passing defenses on the season, has one of the worst secondaries. It's a team that's tough to run on and easy to throw on, kind of similar to the Buccaneers. Last week against the Dolphins in a good matchup, Brown came through with 5 catches, 83 yards, and a touchdown. It was 5,500 in that matchup. Only saw a $400 increase, and you could argue what is just as good of a matchup. So I really like John Brown this week. I want to go ahead and plug him in because I feel like he's going to be someone I play this week. It was kind of like T.Y. Hilton last week. Like, I opened the slate last week on Monday, saw T.Y. Hilton at home against the Texans for only 5,900, and I knew I was going to be playing that this week. I feel like John Brown's another one of those guys. Like, I just see this spot for Brown, the price tag, and I just know I'm going to be playing him. Don't know in cash, but in tournaments I'll for sure have exposure. But now we got 3 spots left, wide receiver, tight end, and defense, and we got 43, 33 remaining. Let's go ahead and plug in a cheap defense so we'll know what we have left. When looking for a cheap defense, I usually like to always target cheap defenses at home. I think there's a couple that stand out already, like the Lions at home against the Giants, Colts at home against the Broncos, Jaguars at home against the Jets, Texans against the Raiders for 2,700 are probably one of the top defenses to go to. So there's definitely a couple defenses. The Panthers have a really good defense, and the 49ers offense has not looked that great this year. It's been a lot of the 49ers defense that has allowed them to win games. So the Panthers defense for only 2,400, even though they're on the road, they could for sure be viable. There's a lot of good cheap defenses this week. I don't think you really need to pay up for like the Patriots or the Rams or the 49ers. I'll be looking at these 3K and below defenses. There's a lot of good ones. Even the Bills at home against the Eagles could be in play. For now, we'll plug in the Panthers because they're the cheapest, and they're the cheapest option that I like. If we do have salary and we want to upgrade, though, we can for sure do that. But now we got 5,300 remaining per player after we plug in the defense, 5,300 remaining for a wide receiver and a tight end. Just looking at tight end this week, I didn't see a ton of great cheap options that I was in love with, like below 4K. There weren't a lot of great value tight ends. Maybe like I would say the best value tight end is probably Gerald Everett for 4,300 against the Bengals. He had a solid game last week against the Falcons, got 10 targets, 4 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown, 15 DraftKings points. Another pretty good matchup against a bad Bengals defense. Only 4,300, he could be an option. Hunter Henry just continues to be productive, continues to see consistent targets. 5, 9, 8 targets in the 3 games he's played this year. 4, 8, 6 catches, 60, 197 yards. Henry was just 3 yards shy of the 100-yard bonus, so could have had an even better game than he had last week against the Titans. You could argue that Hunter Henry is still underpriced at 4,900, but there's a couple other guys that are underpriced in my opinion. Evan Ingram, even though he had a bad game against the Cardinals, Evan Ingram for only 5,300 against the Lions. Lions have actually struggled a lot to tight ends this year. They got killed by Kyle Rudolph last week. I know Kyle Rudolph had a pretty good game against the Lions. And now you got Evan Ingram coming in with a $1,200 discount off of what he was last week. He's for sure viable if you want to go to him in cash. Austin Hooper against the Seahawks is viable at 5,500. Darren Waller, another guy you could play at 5,900. I think for cash this week, it's probably between Waller, Hooper, Ingram, Henry, or Everett. If we plug in Everett at 4,300, let's see what that leaves us at receiver. Leaves us 6,300. And there's not really any receivers I like in that price range. Maybe Allen Robinson at 6K, who I did talk about. Robert Woods, I played in cash last week. I don't think I'm going to be going to him at 6,300. Let's go up from Everett to the next guy. If you go up from Everett to Henry, leaves you 4,900, or that leaves you 5,700. So then you could play Cooks, Ridley, Williams, Shepard, Fitzgerald. Fitzgerald, a guy I do like at 5,400. You could definitely go that route, Henry and Fitzgerald. That leaves you $300 remaining to upgrade. If you wanted to upgrade from Henry to Zach Ertz, you could do that. You'd be just short of Evan Ingram, which sucks because I do like Evan Ingram this week. And there's no defenses I really want to downgrade to. Maybe the Chargers defense against the Bears, because the Bears have just been so bad offensively this year. That's for sure a route you could take. You could downgrade from the Panthers D to the Chargers D with how bad the Bears have looked offensively, with how bad Trubisky's been. And that leaves you enough salary to upgrade to Evan Ingram. So that's a route you could take in cash this week. Obviously, this is a first look, so this is not my full lineup. This is not the lineup I'm going to play. I don't recommend that you guys play this lineup. This is just kind of me talking through the slate, seeing how I'm going to be approaching it. For sure, it's going to be an interesting slate, just because we've got these expensive running backs, but they're really priced up. Same with the quarterbacks. Like a lot of the quarterbacks are in great matchups at the top, but DraftKings did do a good job of pricing them up. So it's going to make for a lot of interesting decisions come Sunday on how you're going to construct your lineup. But for right now, I feel like this is the route I'm going to be taking. Obviously, on Friday when I make my final look video, I'll have more clear thoughts, more clear analysis. But that's pretty much it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I do really appreciate it. You'll notice on the screen I have one of my more recent videos popping up on the screen if you want to check that video out. I would appreciate it. You can also hover over my logo to subscribe to the channel. Feel free to leave any comments, any questions, any feedback down below in the comment section. I always appreciate your guys' comments. If you want to let me know how your Week 7 went, if you see any Week 8 plays that stand out to you, you can always comment that down below. But good luck this week, guys. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Peace.